You felt it, didn't you? Not once, but twice. The same strange pull, the same quiet whisper, the same moment that made you stop and question everything. This isn't coincidence. This isn't your imagination. This is the moment most people ignore, but you didn't. And that's exactly why you're here right now. Because when the signs repeat, it's no longer a suggestion. It's a warning. It's a calling. And this time, you're being told to pay attention. The first time it happened, you brushed it off. You told yourself it was nothing. Just timing, just luck, just overthinking. But deep down, something didn't sit right. There was a weight behind it. A feeling you couldn't explain. And then it happened again. Same energy, same message, different form. That's when everything shifted. Because signs don't repeat for everyone. They repeat for those who are being prepared. For those who are being called into something greater than their current life. And that's where it begins. There are people who move through life asleep, following patterns, living routines, never questioning why things happen. And then there are people like you. You notice patterns others ignore. You feel energy others dismiss. You sense when something is off, even when everything looks normal. That's not random. That's awareness. And awareness comes with a price. Because once you start seeing, you can't unsee. You begin to feel disconnected from people you once related to. Conversations start to feel empty. Places start to feel heavy. And suddenly, you don't fit anymore. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something has changed within you. This is what it means to be chosen. Not chosen in the way the world defines it. Not fame, not status, not recognition, but chosen to see deeper. Chosen to feel more. Chosen to walk a path that most people will never understand. And that path is not easy. Because the moment you start waking up, the world starts pushing back. People question you, doubt you, sometimes even turn against you. Not because they hate you, but because your awareness makes them uncomfortable. You reflect something they are not ready to face. So they try to silence it. They try to label it. They try to pull you back into the version of yourself they understand. But something inside you refuses to go back. That's the sign. The resistance you feel. The isolation you experience. The confusion you're navigating. It's all part of the awakening. And those repeated signs, they were never random. They were checkpoints. Moments designed to wake you up before you drift too far away from your purpose. Because when you ignore the first sign, life will whisper again. And if you ignore it again, it won't whisper the third time. It will shake everything. That's why this moment matters. You're not here by accident. You didn't click on this message by chance. Something led you here. Something aligned this exact moment for you to hear this. Because you were shown twice. And now you're being asked to respond. Not with fear. Not with doubt. But with awareness. Pay attention to what you've been feeling lately. Pay attention to what's leaving your life. Pay attention to what keeps pulling your focus. Those aren't distractions. Those are directions. You are being guided. But guidance only works if you listen. And right now, this is your moment to listen clearly. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to understand the entire path. You just need to trust what you're being shown. Because the truth is, your life is already shifting. The old version of you is fading. The old patterns are breaking. The old connections are dissolving. And what's replacing them is something you can't fully see yet. But you can feel it. That quiet pull, that inner knowing, that sense that something bigger is unfolding. That's not illusion. That's alignment. And the sooner you accept it, the clearer everything becomes. So stop ignoring the signs. Stop questioning what you already feel deep inside. You were shown twice for a reason. Now it's time to move differently. Think differently. See yourself differently. Because this isn't just about awareness anymore. This is about action. And if this message found you at the right time, then you already know what you need to do next. Don't scroll past this moment like it meant nothing. Don't go back to sleep after waking up this far. If this spoke to you, prove it to yourself. Like this video, so you lock this moment into your awareness. Comment, "I see the signs," if you're ready to stop ignoring what you've been shown. And subscribe to Return to Awakening, because this is only the beginning of what you're about to understand. And even now, there's a part of you that feels it's stronger than ever. It's subtle but undeniable, like something is trying to get your attention without making a sound. You've been seeing patterns repeat in your life, not just events, but emotions, situations that feel strangely familiar. Different faces, same lessons. That's not coincidence. That's a cycle trying to close. Because when you don't fully understand a lesson, life doesn't punish you. It repeats it again and again until one day you finally see it for what it is. And that moment is where everything changes. You start realizing it was never about them, never about the situation, never about the surface level problem. It was about what it was trying to show you. Something deeper, something internal, something you've been avoiding without even knowing it. And once you see it, you can't go back to being who you were before. That's the shift. That's why things feel uncomfortable right now. Because you're standing between two versions of yourself. The old one that feels familiar but limited, and the new one that feels unknown but powerful. And most people, they run back to what's familiar, even if it's draining, even if it's holding them back, because the unknown scares them more than staying stuck. But you're not like most people. You've already felt what staying the same does to your soul. You've already experienced that quiet frustration, that feeling of knowing you're meant for more, but not knowing how to reach it yet. That feeling isn't random. It's a signal that your current reality no longer matches who you're becoming. And that's why things start falling apart. Not because your life is breaking, but because it's being rearranged. Slowly, precisely, intentionally. And I know it doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes it feels like loss, like confusion, like everything is slipping out of your control. But what if it was never meant to stay? What if those people, those situations, those versions of yourself were only temporary, and now they've served their purpose? Because you've reached a point where you can no longer grow in the same environment that kept you comfortable. Growth demands separation. Separation from habits, from mindsets, from people who only knew the old version of you. And that's where it gets lonely. That's where you start questioning everything. Why do I feel so different? Why does nothing feel the same anymore? Why do I feel like I don't belong anywhere? Because you're not meant to belong where you've already outgrown. And that realization is one of the hardest parts of awakening, but it's also the most powerful. Because once you accept it, you stop trying to shrink yourself to fit into places that no longer align with you. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. You stop doubting what you feel just because others can't see it. And instead, you start trusting yourself fully, not based on validation, not based on approval, but based on something deeper. That inner knowing that doesn't need proof. That's the voice you've been hearing, the one you ignored the first time, the one that came back stronger the second time. And now, it's not asking anymore. It's waiting for you to respond, because there comes a point where awareness is no longer enough, where seeing the truth isn't enough. You have to act on it. You have to choose differently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Because your path was never meant to make sense to everyone. It was meant to make sense to you. And the more you delay that, the louder life will become. The signs will get stronger. The lessons will get harder. Not to hurt you, but to wake you up completely. Because partial awareness is a dangerous place to stay. You see enough to feel uncomfortable, but not enough to move forward. And that creates tension. That creates confusion. That creates that feeling of being stuck, even though something inside you is telling you to move. That's where you are right now, on the edge, not where you used to be, but not fully where you're meant to go yet. And this moment, this exact phase, is where most people turn back. They distract themselves. They ignore the signs again. They convince themselves it's nothing. And slowly they fall back asleep. But something tells me you're not going to do that this time, because you've already seen too much. You've already felt too much. You've already questioned too deeply to pretend like none of this is real. And that's why this moment matters more than ever. Because this time, you don't just see the signs, you understand them, and understanding changes everything. Because once you understand, you stop reacting blindly. You start observing. You start connecting dots that once felt random. You start seeing the hidden meaning behind what used to confuse you. That's when life stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling intentional. Not easy, but intentional. You begin to notice how certain doors closed right when you were getting too comfortable. How certain people left right when you started evolving. How certain opportunities disappeared, only to make space for something more aligned. At first, it felt like loss. Now it feels like protection. Because not everything that leaves your life is meant to be chased. Some things are removed because they were never meant to go where you're going. And deep down, you knew that. You felt it in those quiet moments when something didn't feel right, even if it looked perfect on the outside. That uneasy feeling, that hesitation, that inner resistance, that was your awareness trying to guide you. But you were taught to ignore it, to be logical, to be realistic, to follow what makes sense to everyone else. And that's why the signs had to come twice. Because the first time, your mind overruled your intuition. But the second time, your soul made sure you couldn't ignore it again. That's the difference now. You're not just thinking anymore. You're feeling and understanding at the same time. And that combination is powerful because it pulls you out of illusion. It makes you question things you once accepted without thinking. It makes you see through people's intentions, even when they say the right words. It makes you aware of energy, not just actions. And once you reach that level, you can't be manipulated the same way again. That's why your circle feels smaller now. It's not that people disappeared randomly. It's that you can see clearly now. You can feel who's genuine and who's only there when it benefits them. You can sense who supports your growth and who feels threatened by it. And instead of forcing connections, you start stepping back, quietly, without drama, without explanation, because not every separation needs closure. Some people were only meant to meet a version of you that no longer exists, and trying to hold on to them only pulls you back into who you used to be. That's why it feels like you're losing people. But in reality, you're losing misalignment and gaining clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what you want. Clarity about what you will no longer tolerate. And that clarity is what guides your next steps. Not fear, not pressure, not expectations, just alignment. And alignment doesn't always feel comfortable. Sometimes it requires you to walk away, even when you still care. Sometimes it requires you to say no, even when you're used to saying yes. Sometimes it requires you to stand alone, even when you wish someone understood. But every time you choose alignment, you get closer to your true path. And that path was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be clear. That's why distractions are falling away. That's why things that once excited you don't feel the same anymore. Because you're not the same anymore. You've outgrown certain desires, outgrown certain mindsets, outgrown certain versions of success that once defined you. And now, you're being guided towards something deeper, something that aligns with who you truly are, not who you were conditioned to be. That's the real shift. Not external, internal. And once that internal shift happens, your external world has no choice but to follow. That's why patience is being tested right now. Because transformation is an instant. It unfolds, step by step, layer by layer. And every time you think nothing is happening, something is rearranging beneath the surface. Old beliefs are breaking. Old fears are losing their grip. Old limitations are being exposed for what they really are. And in their place, a new version of you is being built. Stronger, clearer, more aware than ever before. But that version of you requires trust. Trust in what you feel, even when you can't fully explain it. Trust in the process, even when it looks uncertain. Trust in yourself, even when no one else understands your journey. Because this path was never meant to be validated by the outside world. It was meant to be realized within. And the moment you fully accept that, you stop looking for permission. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop hesitating, and you start moving with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced. That's when everything begins to align differently. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you've become stronger within it, and that strength, it's not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need validation. It's quiet, steady, unshakable. It's the kind of strength that comes from seeing the truth and choosing it anyway, even when it costs you comfort. Because now you understand something most people never realize. Comfort can be a trap. It keeps you in familiar cycles. It convinces you that staying the same is safer than evolving. It whispers that this is enough, even when you feel something deeper calling you. But you didn't come this far to stay where you are. That's why the signs came back. To remind you, you're not here to settle. You're here to transform. And transformation requires movement. Not reckless movement, but intentional movement. The kind where every decision starts to align with who you're becoming. Not who you used to be, That's why certain choices feel heavier now, because you're no longer choosing blindly. You're aware of consequences. You're aware of energy. You're aware of direction. And that awareness changes how you move. You start asking different questions. Does this align with my growth? Is this pulling me forward or holding me back? Am I doing this out of purpose or out of habit? And those questions, they start guiding everything. Even the smallest decisions begin to matter. Because you realize your life isn't shaped by one big moment. It's shaped by the small choices you make every single day. The things you tolerate, the thoughts you entertain, the actions you repeat. And once you become conscious of that, you take your power back. Fully, no more autopilot, no more drifting. Everything becomes intentional. And that's when your energy shifts in a way people can feel, even if they can't explain it. You walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. Not with arrogance, but with certainty. And that kind of energy, it changes how people respond to you. Some will be drawn to it, inspired by it. Others will feel uncomfortable around it, because your presence reminds them of what they're ignoring within themselves. And without saying a word, you challenge them. That's why you might feel misunderstood. That's why people may question your decisions. That's why some will say, "You've changed." And they're right. You have. But what they don't understand is, you had to. Staying the same was no longer an option. And deep down, you know that. You felt it long before you acted on it. That quiet discomfort, that internal tension, that was your soul refusing to stay in a place it had outgrown. And now, you're finally listening. That's the difference. Before you noticed the signs. Now you're responding to them. And that response is what shifts your entire path. Because life meets you at the level you're willing to move. If you hesitate, life slows down. If you ignore, life repeats. But if you act, life aligns. Not instantly, not perfectly, but progressively. Step by step, things start making more sense. You start meeting the right people at the right time. You start seeing opportunities that match your energy. You start experiencing moments that confirm you're on the right path. And those moments, they feel different. There's no doubt, no confusion, just a quiet certainty that says, this is it. That's alignment. And once you experience it, you can't go back to forcing things that don't feel right. You can't go back to chasing what drains you. You can't go back to ignoring what your intuition is clearly showing you. Because now, you've seen both sides. The confusion of being disconnected and the clarity of being aligned. And you know which one feels real. That's why this moment matters so much. Because you're no longer searching blindly. You're recognizing what belongs in your life and what doesn't. Recognizing when something is meant for you and when it's just a distraction. Recognizing the difference between what looks good and what actually feels right. And that level of awareness is rare. Most people never reach it. They stay caught in patterns, repeating the same cycles, ignoring the same signs. But you broke that pattern. You saw the signs twice, and instead of dismissing them, you started paying attention, and paying attention is where everything truly begins. Because awareness without action keeps you stuck in the same place. But awareness with intention moves you into a completely different reality. Now you're starting to notice things you once overlooked. The way certain environments drain you the moment you enter them. The way some conversations feel forced, like you're shrinking just to fit in. The way your energy shifts depending on who you're around. These aren't small details. These are signals. Signals showing you what aligns and what doesn't anymore. And the more you listen to those signals, the more precise your path becomes. That's why distractions don't hit you the same way now. Things that once pulled your attention no longer have that same grip on you. Because you've seen through them, you've realized that not everything that shines is meant for you, and not everything that feels good in the moment is good for your future. That level of discernment is power, real power, not control over others, but control over yourself, your focus, your decisions, your direction. And once you gain that, you stop wasting energy. You stop chasing things that were never meant to stay. You stop trying to fix people who don't want to change. You stop pouring into places that leave you empty. Instead, you become selective, not out of ego, but out of understanding. Understanding that your energy is valuable, and where you place it shapes your entire life. That's why your circle becomes intentional, not based on history, not based on convenience, but based on alignment. Who supports your growth? Who respects your boundaries? Who understands your silence without needing explanation? Those are the people who belong. And the rest, they were part of the lesson, not the destination. That realization alone frees you, because you stop holding on to people out of guilt. You stop staying in situations out of fear. You stop convincing yourself that maybe it will change, when deep down you already know the truth. And truth, once seen, demands action. That's why things feel more intense now, because you're no longer operating in ignorance. You're aware, fully aware, and awareness raises your standards for yourself, for your environment, for your future. You no longer accept what you once tolerated, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you finally understand your worth. And that understanding changes everything. The way you speak to yourself, the way you handle challenges, the way you respond to pressure. You're not reacting emotionally to everything anymore. You pause, you observe, you respond with intention. That shift alone puts you in a different space mentally, a space where clarity replaces confusion, where decisions are made with purpose, not impulse, where your path feels guided, not forced. And the more you stay in that space, the stronger your intuition becomes. It stops feeling like a whisper and starts feeling like a clear voice. Direct, certain, unmistakable, telling you when to move, telling you when to wait, telling you when something is right and when it's not. That's the voice you were meant to trust all along. But you had to go through confusion to recognize clarity. You had to experience misalignment to understand what alignment truly feels like. And now, you can't be fooled the same way again, because you've learned, not just intellectually, but through experience, through moments that tested you, moments that pushed you, moments that forced you to grow, even when you didn't feel ready. And every one of those moments was shaping you, preparing you for this version of yourself, the one who doesn't ignore signs anymore, the one who doesn't second guess every feeling, the one who doesn't wait for permission to evolve. That version of you is here now, not perfect, not finished, but aware. And awareness is the beginning of everything. And once awareness becomes your foundation, everything you build from here starts to carry meaning. No more random decisions. No more moving just to move. Now there's intention behind your steps. Even when you pause, it's intentional, because you've learned that not every moment requires action. Some moments require stillness. Stillness to observe. Stillness to understand. Stillness to listen without the noise of the outside world. That's where clarity deepens. Not in chaos, not in constant movement, but in those quiet spaces where you finally hear yourself clearly. And for a long time, you avoided that silence, because silence forces you to face what distraction hides. It brings your thoughts forward. It exposes your fears. It reveals truths you can't run from. But now, you're no longer afraid of it. You're starting to value it. Because in that silence, you found answers you couldn't find anywhere else. Answers about your path. Answers about your purpose. Answers about who you truly are beneath everything you were taught to be. And those answers, they didn't come all at once. They came in pieces, through experiences, through realizations, through moments where everything just clicked without explanation. That's how awakening works. It's not one big moment. It's a series of small awakenings, stacking on top of each other, until one day, you realize you're not the same person anymore. That's where you are now, in between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space can feel uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. You're letting go of old identities, but you haven't fully stepped into the new one yet. So it feels like you're floating, not grounded in the past, not fully rooted in the future, just in between. And most people misinterpret this phase. They think something is wrong. They think they're lost. But this isn't being lost. This is being reshaped. This is the process of becoming. And becoming requires you to release what no longer fits, even if it once felt like everything. Old beliefs, old goals, old versions of success that no longer resonate with you. You're not confused. You're evolving. And evolution always feels unfamiliar at first, because you're stepping into a version of yourself you've never fully experienced before. That's why doubt tries to creep in. That voice that says, what if you're wrong? What if this isn't real? What if you're overthinking everything? But here's what you need to understand. Doubt is not a sign to stop. It's a test to see if you trust what you've already been shown. Because the signs didn't come once. They came twice. Clear enough to notice. Strong enough to remember. And now, they've led you here. So the question is this real? The question is, are you ready to trust it? Because trust is the next level. Awareness shows you the path, but trust is what makes you walk it. Without trust, you hesitate, you second guess, you delay, you stay in the same place, even though you know there's more ahead. But with trust, you move, even when you don't have all the answers, even when the path isn't fully clear, even when it feels uncomfortable, because you've learned something deeper than logic. You've learned to follow what feels right, not just what looks right. And that difference is what separates you now from who you used to be, from the version of you that needed certainty before taking a step. Now, you're becoming someone who creates certainty by taking the step. That's growth. That's transformation. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments like this. Moments where you pause, reflect, and choose differently than you would have before. Those small shifts, they build momentum. And that momentum changes everything over time. Your mindset shifts. Your habits shift. Your entire direction begins to shift. And suddenly, you're not just thinking differently. You're living differently. That's when people start noticing. Not because you told them, but because they can feel it. There's something different about you. Something they can't quite explain. And the truth is, you've aligned with something deeper within yourself. Something real. Something that was always there, but buried under layers of noise, expectation, and conditioning. And now, you're uncovering it, piece by piece, truth by truth, until eventually, there's nothing left to hide behind. Just you, clear, aware, aligned. And when you reach that level of clarity, something inside you settles. Not because everything around you is perfect, but because you're no longer at war within yourself. For so long, that inner conflict was constant. One part of you wanted growth. Another part wanted comfort. One part saw the truth. Another part tried to ignore it. And that tension, it drained you. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But now, that battle is starting to fade. Because you've stopped resisting what you already know. You've stopped trying to convince yourself that things are okay, when they clearly are. You've stopped silencing that inner voice, just to keep the peace in your external world. And that shift, it brings a different kind of peace. Not the temporary kind. Not the kind that depends on everything going your way, but a deeper peace. The kind that comes from alignment, from knowing, even if things are uncertain, you're no longer betraying yourself. And that alone changes how you move through life. You stop chasing approval. You stop explaining your decision to people who were never meant to understand them. You stop seeking validation for choices that feel right to your soul. Because now, your validation comes from within, from that quiet certainty that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. And the more you operate from that place, the less external noise affects you. Opinions lose their weight. Doubt from others loses its impact. Judgment becomes background noise. Because you've anchored yourself in something deeper, something stable. And once you're anchored, you're not easily shaken. That doesn't mean challenges disappear. They don't, but your relationship with them changes. You no longer see obstacles as signs to stop. You see them as part of the path, as confirmations that you're moving forward, not standing still. Because growth always comes with resistance. Always. Not to block you, but to strengthen you, to prepare you for what's ahead. And now, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That question alone shifts your entire perspective. It turns confusion into curiosity. It turns frustration into awareness. And awareness keeps you moving forward, even when the path feels unclear, because you trust that every step, even the difficult ones, are leading you somewhere necessary. That's the difference now. Before, You needed everything to make sense before you moved. Now, you move and meaning reveals itself along the way. That's a completely different way of living, a way that requires courage, because you're stepping beyond what's predictable, beyond what's comfortable, into something that can't be fully controlled, only experienced. And that's where real growth happens. Not in control, but in surrender. Not surrender in the sense of giving up, but surrender in the sense of trusting the process. Letting go of the need to force outcomes. Letting go of the need to have everything figured out. And allowing life to unfold while you stay aligned with yourself. That balance is powerful because you're no longer fighting against the flow. You're moving with it, guided, aware, intentional. And the more you move like that, the more things start falling into place naturally. Not because you forced them, but because you aligned with them. That's the shift you're stepping into now. From forcing to flowing, from confusion to clarity, from hesitation to quiet confidence. And it all started with those signs, those moments you couldn't explain, those feelings you couldn't ignore. The first time, you questioned them. The second time, you felt them deeper. And now, you're becoming them.